Hello, America. If you watched the previous video, Lead Poisoning, the Navy and Government Failed to Stop, it introduced the nonprofit Stop Lead Poisoning, our goals and evidence of our government's responsibility and failure to protect its citizens and the environment from firearms poisoning. In this video, I will begin identifying actions taken by the government to cover it up. I have in my possession official government documents that chronicle the government's acknowledgement it has been poisoning us with the toxic waste produced by guns and ordnance since 1975 and lead since 1971. I have shown you just a few. I have in my possession official government documents documenting criminal acts committed by federal employees to conceal their role in poisoning us. They violated federal law when they failed to notify us we were exposed and being poisoned, denied us access to medical services, concealed official government documents and reports, conspired to falsify official government statements and documents, presented fraudulent and falsified documents to investigators and a federal judge during a federal hearing, committed perjury during a federal hearing, conspired to commit fraud against the government, committed fraud against the government, engaged in retribution, retaliation, and public malicious defamation of character against the whistleblower reporting all of the above, and other violations. Those employees' actions were executed to conceal their roles and responsibility for poisoning thousands and will cost the taxpayer tens of millions of dollars into the future to treat those of us poisoned, including me. Some of those include actors Gary Sinise in the cast of CSI, Albert Poolhall, Bob Euchre. It includes athletes, military families, children, and more. All of these people were allowed to fire automatic weapons in the indoor range I worked in when these employees knew the range was horribly poisoned with lead. As I stated in the previous video, I have provided evidence of the above crimes to every person in my chain of command through Donald Trump. On 17 September, after I document for you the magnitude and severity of the government's failure, I will reveal what actions our government and President Donald Trump have taken to address this evidence and prevent further poisoning. Who am I? For the time being, I prefer to stay somewhat anonymous. The White House knows who I am. This effort takes up all of my time, leaving none to deal with questions that will be answered in later videos. I am, however, a certified Navy and Special Operations weapons and laser expert. Over my 29-year career, I employed, maintained, instructed, and fired lasers, nuclear-capable guided missile and depth-charge weapon systems, naval gun systems, minor caliber guns used on ships, boats, planes, helicopters, tanks, and armored vehicles, mortars, machine guns, and every rifle and handgun in our inventory. I ran the largest Navy small arms repair facility and armory on the West Coast, indoor and outdoor ranges, and have personally instructed and ran ranges poisoning thousands of military, law enforcement, and civilian personnel. As a lifelong hunter, firearms collector, weapons expert, and special operations sailor, training and deploying with both the military and law enforcement, I will identify the source, route, and contamination points in the day-to-day lives of each of these hobbies and occupations. I will identify the hazards to our neighborhoods, public lands, and our ground and drinking water. Stop Lead Poisoning will present products, practices, and legislation that will allow us to continue to hunt, defend ourselves, and participate in shooting sports while stopping the continued poisoning of our people and the environment. With products currently available today, these are all possible. Each of the following goals will be addressed in detail in separate videos. Together, we can ban those 21 and younger from firearms use and secondhand contact with the 40-plus toxic compounds the Army and EPA identified almost 20 years ago. The documented neuro and physiological damage to those under 21 this poisoning causes far outstrips those that current tobacco and alcohol laws and regulations prevent, and provides the evidence and case law necessary to immediately proceed with this step at the state level. Ban the AR-15, M16, and other gas-operated firearms that remove toxic gases and particulate matter from the barrel before incineration and redirect it into the face and breathing zone of the shooter. As I will demonstrate, these weapons are of a dangerous, antiquated design and pose the most serious firearms poisoning hazard of all firearms available and in use today. Ban firearms usage on public lands. No one has the right to poison and litter our lands with toxic particulate matter, abandoned lead bullets, contaminated bullet casings, plastic shotgun shells, and shotgun shell plugs. There are products that allow continued hunting and shooting sports on these lands without the negative impact of firearms usage. Pass legislation to define guns into three categories by use: sporting, defensive, and offensive. This legislation will ban guns classified for offensive use by the general public. We will work to limit firearms emissions using existing case law to limit and control emissions like we do from any other source. It's not as hard as it sounds. Define firearms poisoning to include the 40-plus toxic compounds and force immediate action by the government to protect our society, children, and environment from it. We will force our military, VA, state, and local medical systems to reclassify applicable PTSD and other affected incorrect diagnoses such as autism and ADHD to lead and firearms poisoning for all people exposed and provide free medical care for life with no copays ever. Why is this so important? Veterans, law enforcement, and their family members I have presented this evidence to have gone from believing they are somehow mentally deficient, suffering from a mental disorder, to understanding that they are victims of lead and firearms poisoning. The same goes for mothers suffering miscarriage and families raising mentally challenged children and those born with birth defects. They no longer blame themselves, understanding that they and their children are victims of a government that has failed them. I apologize for having to read this to you like this. You see, I'm a victim too. I'm a disabled vet suffering from the physical, neurological, and neurobehavioral effects of lead and firearms poisoning. Look around the news today. Check out burn pits and the burn pit registry online. Check out the Army moving to address the sudden crisis of lead paint in housing for children and how it once again has hit the news. Check out U.S. senators seek review of lead in military housing. It's all been done before with no action taken to stop it. They talk and have conversations, no action. Look up the Lead Poisoning Prevention Act of 1971. The government recognized this hazard and initiated action to address it almost 50 years ago, and yet still, here we are being poisoned, all talk and no action. Millions of Americans continue to be poisoned, billions of dollars are spent on medical care to treat them, and nothing gets done to stop it. Why? The U.S. government is the largest employer of employees and their families affected by these epidemics. President Donald Trump is the CEO. The United States government controls more public lands than any other entity in the United States. Donald Trump is the CEO. The U.S. government has recognized the hazards of firearms and lead poisoning for decades and yet still continues to allow the spread of toxic, hazardous waste throughout our environment, poisoning us. Since 1971, the government we entrusted to safeguard us has failed. We, the taxpayers, fund thousands of government employees at multiple government agencies whom have acknowledged we in the environment are being poisoned by lead and firearms for almost 50 years. They sit there, even today, in government jobs we get up every morning and go to work and pay taxes to fund, while they continue to allow us, our loved ones, and the environment to be poisoned. They have failed us. Help me fire them and stop this. Who sits at the top? The Chief Executive Officer of the executive branch of the government, our military commander-in-chief, President Donald Trump. For 1 year, I have been providing him, his political appointees, and military commanders evidence of our uncontrolled poisoning and his subordinates' criminal activity to conceal it. 17 September, I will reveal what he and his subordinates have done to address the evidence I have presented. America, what can you do? Get involved. Get the word out. Donate. Chances are you or someone close to you is affected by this epidemic. We can make a difference. Together, we can stop lead poisoning. After Monday, 17 September, you may contact me at contact.us@stopleadpoisoning.com. Thank you.